For the royals, tradition is everything.
Tradition is the raison d'etre of the royal family, the human embodiment of Britishness.
Spectacular.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Sacred.
It's almost as though the king is invested with superpowers.
And very British.
Victoria's funeral was a reminder that we were still the dog's whatnots at this game.
Now we reveal the secrets of those traditions. From banquets, to christenings, to coronations.
You may think it's pantomime, but no, the uniforms were handed down from servant to servant.
And how some traditions can go wrong.
With Elizabeth I, her body actually exploded in its coffin.
It's a rich royal heritage that's been forged through duty to the nation.
The British monarchy is always at the service of the British state.
No matter what the task.
The duty of the royals is to go and open every damn thing that's around, from a supermarket to sewage works.
The Queen loved it. Prince Philip hated it.
As for over 1,000 years, the royals have shaped the history and the traditions we know today.
They're sending out a message. This is an ancient institution, and it's here to stay.
These are the secrets of royal traditions, then and now. This time, the most traditional of royal traditions, the coronation.
Older than England, older than Christianity, back to the Bronze Age.
The traditional tensions of taking the press pack on royal tour.
Prince Philip hated the press. He called them reptiles.
And how centuries of tradition gifted the royals vast swathes of Britain and the right to eat some of its wildlife.
None of them have recently availed themselves of the opportunity, so the swan population continues unharmed.
On the 6th of May 2023, following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III was crowned at Westminster Abbey.
The pomp, the pageantry, the detail. No one does it like we do it.
But for even the most seasoned royal watcher, many of the traditions on display were mystifying.
It did at times seem almost like a pantomime, because it was so very strange in so many ways. I think the weirdest one for me was the white glove. It looked to me as if he was perhaps going to go and do a little gardening at Highgrove or something.
The single glove may look like it belongs to a Michael Jackson tribute act, but it's actually a symbol of the monarch's commitment to ruling with a fair hand. First used at Richard II's coronation in 1377. And incredibly, the glove is a new addition compared to some of the coronation's other traditions.
It's astonishing how many of the elements actually date back, not hundreds, but thousands of years.
The coronation ceremony has followed the same template, with a few tweaks, for over 1,000 years.
The blueprint for today's coronations was set in the year 973 by King Edgar. He introduced really the form of coronation ceremony that's still used today.
It was Edward I who introduced the ceremony's focal point, used at every coronation in Westminster Abbey since 1308.
Every British monarch who's been crowned was crowned sitting on that coronation chair.
This roll call of past occupants gives the coronation chair its power. By sitting in it, the new ruler inherits that power.
It's about heredity, and it's about handing things down. It's about doing things that we can associate with the past, even if they're updated for a modern age.
Nowhere is the bond between past and present stronger than in the coronation's central ritual. A ritual so sacred, we're forbidden from even seeing it.
What we didn't see on the day, because there was a screen and it's never seen, was the monarch who had kind of stripped to simple clothing, invested on his head and his chest and his hands with anointing oil. So like this and like this and like this, so perhaps with the sign of the cross.
The secrecy dates back centuries and stems from the belief that this sacred moment is for the monarch and God alone. But the tradition itself is far older even than the royal family.
Older than England, older than Christianity, tracking you way back to the Bronze Age because of the anointing, as King Solomon was anointed as king of the Israelites.
This ancient ritual's purpose is to present the king as the successor in a long line of rulers, stretching back over 3,000 years to the Old Testament kings Solomon, Saul, and David. Kings who were believed to be appointed by God.
The anointing symbolises the moment when a monarch really becomes almost divine. They are given powers by God.
In times past, having God on your side was a good way to deter any rivals for the throne. Even in modern times, anointing has remained a tradition with deep spiritual significance, particularly for the late Queen.
I felt the presence of God. That's quite chilling when the monarch tells you that. I would think King Charles III felt the same thing. It's a very solemn moment.
The finishing touch is, of course, the crown. And it's another tradition as old as time.
Crowning is a little bit like marriage in that it's so ancient that we have no real idea when it originated. Ancient monarchs are crowned. You see it in something like the Narmer palette of the early pharaohs, which is 5,000 years ago. Coronations change and shift over the centuries, but what goes on the head of the monarch seems to be a recurring theme throughout them.
In the case of the British crown, this tradition weighs heavily on its wearer.
St Edward's crown is so immensely heavy, the late Queen said if you bent forward you would break your neck.
There was a lot of tension over placing St Edward's crown, which is really heavy, on the king's head, and the Archbishop had to be very careful to get it the right way round, because in the past there was definitely one occasion when the Archbishop put it on backwards.
But even when everything goes according to plan, all this tradition can take its toll.
And it all seemed to me a bit of an ordeal for the principals. I can't say that I thought that either Charles or Camilla looked relaxed at any point, and I really felt rather sorry for them.
But maybe not too sorry, because with the crown came a vast fortune, thanks to the royal tradition of being exempt from tax.
There's no doubt that the head of state is wealthy, and that's partly because there's no death duties paid, and there's no income tax paid on the income that comes in pursuit of their duties.
When the late Queen died, King Charles inherited vast estates in Scotland and England. His mother's personal wealth of at least £370 million, and the Duchy of Lancaster, worth around £652 million.
So that probably has meant the accumulation of a large amount of personal wealth, which is probably at least £500 million.
On top of this windfall, the king inherited 25% of the annual profits from the vast Crown estate, which is worth at least £15 billion. And with that comes a host of highly lucrative and occasionally unusual items, ranging from London's Regent Street to the seabed surrounding the UK coastline. And yes, the king really does own the nation's wild mute swans. According to medieval law, for centuries the monarch was technically the only person in Britain with the right to eat one.
None of them have recently availed themselves of the opportunity, so the swan population continues unharmed.
This enormous wealth originated in the Middle Ages, when the royal family began accumulating power by acquiring land. This royal property portfolio ballooned in the 16th century, thanks to Henry VIII.
When Henry in the 1530s made himself head of the church, then all the church wealth The wealth of the monasteries, church lands were all diverted to the crown. And that was really the beginnings of the enormous wealth that the crown has enjoyed throughout 500 years or more.
Coming up, the great royal tradition of spending all that wealth by building extensions.
Henry wants to live in a new way. He wants more sumptuousness, and nothing is going to stand in his way.
The extravagant traditions of royal childhood.
PlayStations, plasma screen TVs, games. William and Harry could have anything they wanted.
And the traditional hijinks of the press pack on tour with the royals.
And then we all got in a jacuzzi outside under the stars, and Charles's press secretary got in with us.
The Royal Overseas Tour is a familiar and much-loved tradition.
Squeals of delight greeted Charles and Diana.
And an integral part of that tradition is the Royal Press Pack.
I very much enjoyed the state visits, which were historic in nature. Going to India with Charles and Diana in 1992 and seeing her sit at the Taj Mahal, the Monument to Beauty. Going to Russia on a state visit and the security in Red Square being so intense that they swept the whole place of every Russian. And the Duke of Edinburgh walking up and down lines of tourists from Manchester and all over the place. There's not a bloody Russian anywhere to be found, you know? Many, many wonderful occasions.
Taking the press pack on tour is a relatively new royal tradition.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
One of the first tours selected members of the press were invited to join was the late Queen's 1953 trip to Australia and New Zealand.
It will surely be on Bondi Beach, that natural glory of Sydney, that the Queen and Duke will retain some of their most pleasant memories of the tour.
With the coming of photography, and particularly television, the royal family had woken up to the media's potential to promote them and the nation to a global audience.
Elizabeth II once said, "I have to be seen in order to be believed." The photographer's lens is the way in which millions, later billions of people see the royal family.
The press pack has become a traditional fixture on royal overseas trips, but not always a popular one.
Prince Philip hated the press. He hated them. He called them reptiles. He called them names that I could not possibly repeat.
So a royal tour is no holiday for the royals or the press pack, particularly when things go south.
I do regret one thing from the Caribbean tour I covered, which was drinking, for some inexplicable reason, river water from a South American river. I don't know, I was rather carried away. And then for most of the rest of the tour, I did have terrible diarrhea. And it's quite hard when you're like traveling in convoy up country or filing from some strange place and you're like desperately on the anti-diarrhea pills.
Avoiding the local water is a good excuse for the press pack's own tradition of partying.
We let loose a bit, we reporters, and we had a karaoke night, and big burly cameraman wearing his producer's silk dress did a somersault and split the dress, and then we all got in a jacuzzi outside under the stars, and Charles's press secretary got in with us actually as well. We made a lot of noise, we had a lovely time. Charles came down in the morning and he said, "Was that you lot making that bloody awful noise? Honestly, I couldn't sleep a wink." So we had a lot of fun.
Despite their royal duties, fun is something the royal family takes seriously. And it's a tradition that begins in childhood, with the giving of elaborate and sometimes excessive gifts.
William and Harry could have anything they wanted. PlayStations, plasma screen TVs, games, anything really the boys wanted.
In the past, toys were traditionally gifted to royal children to curry favour with the monarch. Prince Andrew received a miniature James Bond-style Aston Martin DB5, complete with toy machine guns and a working smokescreen, while his older siblings bagged a pint-sized caravan, which can't have been easy to wrap. Today, the tradition of unusual and extravagant royal toys is one the royal family seems keen to minimise.
In William and Kate's world, their children won't be spoiled. I think things in moderation. Kate's very sensible that way.
They like quite traditional pursuits, like having a barbecue in the gardens, riding around on their bicycles, playing on tractors. I think part of William and Catherine's absolute ethos in life is to make their family as normal as is possible. That's never going to be normal, is it? But that's why they live in a relatively small house without live-in staff.
William and Kate's restrained approach represents a major break with royal tradition because their predecessors had much more extravagant tastes. In fact, they made a tradition out of flaunting their wealth and power by spending vast sums of money upgrading their royal palaces. And the biggest and most excessive royal renovator of them all was Henry VIII.
Hampton Court is the greatest surviving example of Henry VIII's work. This sprawling red brick complex represents an investment of about £62,000 in his money, tens of millions today.
And Henry's building at Hampton Court, like everything he did, was taken to extremes of scale.
Hampton Court is the Tudor palace par excellence. It doesn't come much better than this. It's visually stunning. It really is a palace built by a Renaissance man, and it just shouts power and richness.
Henry VIII is renowned as one of the great royal palace builders. He acquired new-built, developed, extended residences across the country. When he came to the throne in 1509, he inherited about 20 properties from his father, Henry VII. When he died 38 years later, he'd amassed close to 70 properties.
This palace-building frenzy was kick-started by his famous midlife crisis.
By the time we hit 1528, 1529, he's been married to Catherine of Aragon for 20 years. And they only have one child to show for it, a girl, Princess Mary. So he's facing this real dilemma in terms of his legacy.
He wants to get rid of his long-standing wife, Catherine of Aragon. He wants a new wife, Anne Boleyn. He wants to live in a new way. He wants more sumptuousness, and nothing is going to stand in his way.
Henry wasn't the first English king hell-bent on flexing his power and flaunting his wealth. 300 years earlier, his namesake Henry III flashed the cash by transforming his properties, including the Tower of London. But Henry VIII turned this tradition into an obsession.
He gets the building bug big time, and he's getting directly involved in the process. He's poring over the plans, he's directing people, he's deciding the grand way that he wants to live from now on.
Henry seized Hampton Court from his former advisor, Cardinal Wolsey, seeing it as the perfect royal doer-upper.
Henry VIII's builders took over Hampton Court and embarked on a program of massive expansion that would last for over a decade. There was the practical stuff to consider: new offices, lodgings for the royal courtiers, but also beautiful new privy gardens and suites of accommodation for not only Henry VIII, but also his mistress, Anne Boleyn, who was not yet queen. There's no lodgings, though, for the old queen, Catherine of Aragon. This was all about Henry's future.
Henry's future would include a vast entourage, and all needed accommodation at Hampton Court.
This might include members of his family, senior nobles, certainly his privy council, servants and pages and knights and yeomen, and that everyone required to support all of that.
Henry's huge household was a projection of his power, and they would come together daily in one all-important room.
This fabulous space, the Great Hall, was at the heart of Henry VIII's building works. We know from records that in summer 1535, there were 70 stonemasons and 81 bricklayers. There were 45 carpenters and 21 joiners, plus 208 labourers, all working away to complete this grand vision at the heart of the palace.
At Hampton Court, Henry VIII took the tradition of royal renovations to an extreme, transforming every inch of his vast palace. No surface, no corner was left untouched.
I'm heading for one of the most unexpectedly spectacular and costly parts of the palace. I'm not talking about rooms full of tapestries. I'm talking about the roof.
Here, where few ventured, Henry turned the functional into the fantastic.
Each one of these chimneys is different to the next. There are 241 of them, and they excel in their quality and variety. Now, it must be said, not a single one remains intact from Henry VIII's period, but they have been faithfully duplicated with bricks cleverly made into molds so that you can create these geometric designs. One like a net, another one with zigzags, another like a set of knotted ropes. They have all the festival atmosphere of a maypole. They don't have to be like that, but this is expenditure. It's showing off for its own sake.
Coming up, ancient royal traditions on parade.
The thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
The great tradition of banishing unpopular royals.
Andrew couldn't be on the balcony and couldn't embarrass the royals. Harry and Meghan couldn't be on the balcony.
And the royal rituals of playboy princes.
He was a gambler, he was a bit of a drinker, and he was constantly at it. He had a voracious appetite for women.
Britain's royal traditions have been carefully crafted to capture the public imagination. And few are more captivating than the trooping of the colour.
The soldiers are coming in on their horses and their breastplates gleaming, and there's the thundering of the hooves and the banging of the drums. I defy anyone not to get thrilled by that.
Every year, on the King's official birthday, Horse Guards Parade in London plays host to a grand military parade of around 1,400 soldiers, 200 horses, and 400 musicians. It's a colourful and spectacular celebration. But its roots lie in the chaos and horror of war.
Trooping of the colour harkens back to a time when kings led their soldiers into battle. The colours they refer to are the regimental banners, and they played a huge role in keeping soldiers as safe and alive as is possible in an early modern or medieval battle.
On the battlefield, it could get very confusing, and it was very important for every single soldier to know who he was fighting, who was on his side. And so each army would have their own colours, and the flags would display that colour. And so regularly during manoeuvres, during battles, the regiment's flag would be marched up and down so that every single soldier knew which side he was on.
After the parade, the royal family traditionally view the procession up the Mall from the Buckingham Palace balcony. For some royal watchers, this tradition is an indication of who's in favour with the monarch and who's out. In 2022, after a bombshell interview with US television the previous year, speculation mounted as to whether Harry and Meghan would be welcomed on the balcony or banished to peer out of a window.
I think the Queen came up with a pretty elegant solution to who got to watch Trooping the Colour from where. Only working royals got to be on the Buckingham Palace balcony. That killed two birds with one stone, if you like. It meant that Andrew couldn't be on the balcony and couldn't embarrass the royals, and it meant that Harry and Meghan couldn't be on the balcony.
So Harry and Meghan watched the dripping of the colour from the Major General's office. And those were the first shots, actually, that we had of Harry and Meghan in the UK for a long time.
The following day, suspicions that the Sussexes were being sidelined seemed to be confirmed at the traditional birthday Thanksgiving service.
If Harry and William and Kate and Meghan really had made up, this would have been the perfect opportunity to show that. Perhaps they could have arrived together, perhaps they could have been smiling together, perhaps they could have sat near each other.
They sat on the second row, Prince William and Kate sat in the front row on the other side of the church, and there was no eye contact or conversation between them whatsoever.
The current royal family aren't the first royals to have fallen out. In fact, you could say family tension is something of a royal tradition. In 1862, it was friction between Queen Victoria and her wayward son Edward that prompted him to join the long tradition of royal renovators, when he set out to turn sleepy Sandringham House into a Playboy party pad. Set in 20,000 acres of Norfolk countryside, this mini-kingdom has been the private home of 4 generations of British monarchs.
I think Sandringham occupies a unique position among the royal residences, and each succeeding generation of royals has loved it.
Sandringham is about the private person. It's about the family life behind the image of the throne.
In 1862, Queen Victoria acquired the Sandringham estate for her somewhat rogue son and heir, Edward.
Edward was notorious. As much as his parents were sort of chintzy and conservative and domestic and dull, Edward was revolting, libidinous. He was a gambler, he was a bit of a drinker, and he was constantly at it. He had a voracious appetite for women.
Marlborough House, Edward's London home, was notorious. His parents were determined that Sandringham would be a sobering retreat where he could grow into the role of king.
Get him back on track, stick him in an off-path, off-beat estate, and see if we can't improve his behaviour somewhat.
In keeping with royal tradition, Edward threw himself into the project, demolishing the original Georgian house to make way for a fashionable new house.
Sandringham was a style which some people call Jacobean. It's a generic 16th into 17th century revival. It talks about an age of historical confidence. It's youthful, it's a bit extravagant, but by no means too extravagant.
The new Sandringham looked sensible on the outside, but inside, contrary to his parents' hopes, it was a palatial party house.
You wonder what the architect's brief was for Sandringham. If you have a checklist for the racy young monarch-to-be of the 1860s and 70s, you might want a bowling alley or billiard tables. But you've got to have the space to entertain people and to get engaged in country pursuits. And if you are a Prince of Wales, you've got to do it in style.
Edward also made the most of Sandringham's vast estate, turning it into a shooting paradise, complete with Europe's largest game larder.
It was less in many respects about the house and more about the grounds, this kind of Playboy park, for want of a better expression, which is where a lot of Edward's attention went. They planted thickets and they imported literally bags of partridges and pheasants and rabbits to get this started, to make this the very best shoot in England. And that really, really mattered at the time.
Over time, Queen Victoria finally got her way, as Edward and Sandringham settled into respectable middle age.
The thing about Sandringham is that, like its inhabitants, it grew up. It went from being a place of billiards and bowling to more cultured pursuits as Edward VII and Queen Alexandra and their children all evolved and grew up. And so the old bowling alley became the Long Library, and that's where the Queen is shown when she gave her first televised address to the nation. So it's not a fixed thing. It shows a life lived.
Today, Sandringham is estimated to be worth as much as £200 million. But royal tradition meant that when King Charles inherited the house and estate in 2023, he didn't pay a penny of tax.
The monarch has been enabled since Queen Victoria's time to acquire a lot of personal wealth because there's no death duties from monarch to monarch.
But this tradition doesn't extend to the rest of the family, who aren't quite as minted as you might imagine.
I think it's a mistake to think that all members of the royal family are immensely wealthy. If you're a subsidiary member of the royal family, most of your income actually comes from offsetting public duties. It's kind of pay for the duties. So they're kind of dependent on handouts.
Can you imagine how sore that makes you feel if you are a Harry or a Margaret?
But the consequences of this tradition extend beyond tensions between siblings. As Princess Margaret's children, David and Sarah, discovered when she died in 2002, and left them with a £3 million tax bill.
When you and I have to pay inheritance tax on an estate, the normal thing to do is to sell the house. But Margaret didn't have a house. She lived in Kensington Palace. It's owned by the country.
With no property to sell, Margaret's children had to think fast.
How do we pay off this £3 million inheritance tax bill? We're going to have to sell some of our mother's possessions.
And so began the royal bling and buy sale, with more than 800 items up for grabs.
This is an unprecedented sale of a lifetime. Royal possessions being auctioned off.
It's the equivalent of setting up a car boot sale on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace.
As car boot sales go, this one was pretty upmarket. Jewellery expert Helen Molesworth was put in charge of the sale.
It was an incredible opportunity. This was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I'll never forget it.
Helen was responsible for the sale of the most astonishing collection. Rings, brooches, bracelets, each one steeped in royal tradition.
In some instances, we were opening boxes to find the jewels with handwritten notes from members of the family inside. There was a tiny little bee brooch accompanied by a note in Princess Margaret's writing that said, "One of the first pieces of jewellery ever given to Mum." I mean, this is a secret that needed exploring. It was a christening gift to the Queen Mother when she was 7 weeks old.
But the centrepiece of the collection was the Baltimore tiara.
It's one of the most spectacular tiaras in the world anyway. It was made in the 19th century by Garrard.
The auction was a unique chance to own a piece of royal tradition.
24,000 in the West Room.
The room was packed full of people. It was pre-internet days, so people were physically there or on the telephone with us.
And 50, 700.
I think we knew from the beginning it was going to take off.
All the rooms.
Lot one was Princess Margaret's ruby and pearl necklace, and that was estimated to fetch £1,200.
Fair warning for all the room. 40 also. And 23,000 down there.
It sold for well over £23,000.
Sold to you.
That's how the rest of the auction went. Completely bonkers.
Do I hear £13,000 for an album of lunch menu cards?
30,000.
It seems I do.
Every item sold for way above its estimate. The difference was that some sold for 5 times the estimate and some sold for 150 times the estimate.
The auction moved inexorably towards its climax.
We made sure that we ended with the Baltimore tiara. I'm not going to start with the top lot in the sale.
Estimated at between £150,000 and £200,000, the Baltimore tiara sold for nearly £1 million. The auction had paid off the family's £3 million tax bill, and then some.
At the end of the day, when the final hammer went down, we're looking at £14 million. It's not just the value on what the items were themselves, the jewels, the paintings. It's knowing that they were once part of Princess Margaret's collection.
Buying the princess's jewels meant buying into centuries of royal tradition.
That's what you're buying into, and there's no price tag on that.
Coming up, the great royal tradition of strange rituals.
It's members of the royal family dressing up in the most ridiculous costumes, with hats, with feathers.
And the tradition of receiving extraordinary and extravagant toys.
It is the most ostentatious playhouse you'll ever see.
Royal traditions, shaped by strict protocol and steeped in centuries-old symbolism, can be dazzling, but also puzzling. Perhaps the most perplexing royal tradition is the secretive Brotherhood of Knights, who gather once a year behind closed doors at Windsor Castle. The most noble order of the Garter was founded in 1348 by King Edward III.
The Order of the Garter is the highest order of chivalry in England, and in fact it's the oldest order anywhere in the world that's been in continuous existence.
It's a group of 24 people who are fiercely loyal and swear to protect the king and country.
The traditions of this ancient order have been passed down through the generations. Every year on the traditional Garter Day, the monarch, knights and ladies process through Windsor Castle to St George's Chapel to attend a special, secret service.
It's members of the royal family dressing up in the most ridiculous costumes, with hats, with feathers, processing down to Windsor Castle. It is a picture opportunity for the wives mainly, like Camilla and Kate, to laugh at their husbands.
Today, the knights' costumes might raise a smile, but their symbolism is steeped in centuries-old tradition. According to legend, when a lady accidentally dropped her garter at a dance, to save her embarrassment, chivalrous Edward III tied it around his own leg, declaring, "Shame on him who thinks evil of it." The garter and that motto, in Latin, became the order's symbol. But over the centuries, quite what the order is supposed to do has become shrouded in mystery.
I don't think we really, as a nation, have much idea of what it's all about. For me, the Order of the Garter, I don't know quite why, always stirs up memories of the Da Vinci Code and Dan Brown, secret sect.
The Order's earliest records were destroyed by fire. But it seems to have been a kind of medieval cosplay club in which the royals and their pals could act out their fantasies of King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. The club's spiritual home is Windsor Castle, where St George's Chapel houses each knight's helmet, sword and banner.
These are the flags of the knights and ladies of the Order of the Garter. Now, when a new knight or lady gets invested, they get given their own heraldic flag. The flags are 5 foot square, they are all handmade and meticulously hand-painted, and they're full of personal symbols that relate specifically to the history and life of the person who's just been brought into the order.
These members are selected by the monarch from a variety of backgrounds in recognition of their public service.
Mary Peters, for instance, who won the pentathlon in the 1972 Olympics, has the Olympic rings in the centre of her flag. John Major has a portcullis, the symbol of the Houses of Parliament, and on top of that are 3 cricket balls to reflect his passion for the game.
The 24 loyal knights and ladies are joined in the order by another very select group.
Some members of the royal family act as extra members, and the Queen Mother was one of those.
The royal standard of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, combines the royal standard of her husband, King George VI, with her own family coat of arms, the Bowes Lions. So she has lions represented, but also 3 bows.
According to tradition, the Queen Mother's standard hung in St George's Chapel for 66 years. Upon her death, it was taken down to make way for a new member. The then Prince Charles, who was particularly close to his grandmother, couldn't bear to be parted from it.
Anyone who goes to Clarence House, one of the first things that they will see as they come in through the front door is the banner hanging there.
Every time he saw it, it would act as a reminder of his beloved grandmother.
For the royals, Passing much-loved mementos down through the generations is a firm family tradition. Tucked away in the grounds of Windsor Castle is one of the family's most charming hand-me-downs, and the ultimate example of the long tradition of extraordinary royal playthings. The Welsh Cottage, as it's called, was built in 1932 for the late Queen Elizabeth.
The Welsh Cottage is the most ostentatious playhouse you'll ever see. It's 22 feet wide by 15 feet tall and built as a proper functioning house with a living room and kitchen and bedroom and bathroom, as well as a Frezolux gas-powered refrigerator, a gas cooker, all the mod cons you'd expect of 1932, even a heated towel rail.
We've got a wonderful first-hand account of what this giant Wendy house was like, courtesy of Elizabeth's governess, Marion Crawford. She tells us that when she arrived to look after Elizabeth, the first thing the princess showed her was this little Welsh house. It was her favourite toy. And there's wonderful pictures of the girls playing house in a way that arguably they never really got to do, even when they had their own houses and palaces later in life.
The cottage was a surprise present for the then Princess Elizabeth's 6th birthday. It was built 130 miles away in South Wales, then in the grip of poverty.
This was the era of the Great Depression, and Welsh industry had suffered. So the cottage was a showcase of Welsh artisanal talent before it came to the secretive garden in the middle of Windsor Great Park for the princess to enjoy.
Before we part and go back to our homes in Wales, we should give 3 cheers for the little Princess Elizabeth.
And it's been here now for almost 100 years.
Today, Windsor's hidden Wendy house is playing home to another generation of royals, with George, Charlotte and Louis living just down the road. It's another example of how Britain's royal traditions are passed down through the generations. From treasured family mementos, to grand public spectacles, secret societies, to ancient rituals. Together, these traditions play a crucial role in presenting Britain on the global stage.
People don't tend to come to Britain for the weather, they come for the history and the traditions that we see enacted at great royal events such as coronations, royal weddings. People like to think that they're part of something that's been going for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Next time, the traditions that make a state banquet the meal of a lifetime.
A state banquet is all about magnificence. There's a lot of showing off, of wealth, of ceremony, of pomp.
How royal school days have changed beyond all recognition.
Prior to the reign of Elizabeth II, royal children were almost invariably taught at home by private tutors. They did not go to schools.
And the age-old royal tradition of taking a mistress, or 2, or 3.
Edward VII was very well known as an extremely randy Prince of Wales.